call?
Mr. Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Philmetzger.
Here.
Mr. Gifford.
Here.
Mr. Jessic.
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. LaSalle.
Here.
Mr. McEnroe.
Here.
Mr. Mahoney. Mr. Meyer.
Here. Oops. Oh, it is.
New title.
Just doesn't have a cover on it.
Yeah, it doesn't have the wind.
Okay, number 2, approval of the minutes. Any changes?
I've got some
Discrepancy?
corrections.
Go ahead.
Where am I here? Section 4, Bob LaSalle requested that Oak Tree Drive, the drive should be terrace.
I thought Oak Tree Terrace was the main road,
Yeah.
and the side road was Drive. Where you at?
Oh, is that right? I never saw a sign up there.
Well, I think it's listed that way on OC map.
Oh, okay. Well, then I stand corrected.
We'll check, Bob.
Okay.
And the
then,
next sentence in that same
Where are you
paragraph.
at? Where is this?
Well, as long as you're there.
This in Section 4, the agenda analysis.
Page 1.
Yeah, first page.
Okay.
Item 4, I guess it would be the agenda analysis.
While you're
And
there,
then
Bob,
6.
the next line,
Oh.
the very next line.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Blaine Meyer 1 or 2.
Oh,
Walk
yeah.
on an item.
You don't like that?
Yeah.
I'm guessing it was talk.
I don't know, Blaine's a pretty swift fellow sometimes.
Should
think
be
the
bike.
idea is-
You wanted a bike on an
You want a
agenda.
bike on an item.
Wasn't that the discussion about paths in Newell Creek Canyon?
I believe so.
And then there was another one, let's see here. 6B4. On the third paragraph, the second line was the ultimate goal was to greet every patch. Should be changed to greet every passenger arriving. That's all I have.
Any other corrections? Do I hear a motion with the corrections?
So moved.
Second?
I hear a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving right on. General analysis, discussion of new business, like that.
I'd like to add a subject of opting out of TriMet.
Okay,
I'd like to add 2 items, one about Olson Drug site and the other one about left turns onto Malawa up by Safeway.
Say those again.
I
Wait.
have, yeah.
Which one?
Both of them.
Oh, Olson Drug site, pedestrian use of the sidewalks. And at Malawa, the left turns onto Malawa from the Safeway, Walgreen, KFC site.
I have one. It's the lighting of the elevator with the pictures. You come off the bridge. I've heard a couple people almost run the light because when they were testing it, they're looking at it and looking at the light.
I can buy that.
So that's a safety concern to me. So, is there anything else?
Excuse me, because I'm new here, I don't know what the procedure is for adding something. How prepared do you need to be to talk about it? I mean, it seems like we've got a lot to talk about, that I'm not going to throw something else in. But can I put something on next month's agenda?
Sure can. That's at the end of the,
Okay.
end of the
That's fine.
agenda. Okay, any citizens? Let's move on. New business. Introduction of new TAC members. I think, did we do that last time? or-
Sit him here.
Yeah, there's some new members that are effective January 1st, and I don't think we've done those yet. So just in your packet, there's a report on this, but at the January 15th, 2014 meeting with the City Commission, the following appointments were made to the Transportation Advisory Committee. And that is Sedemar Jessic, who'll be holding an at-large position for the term January 1, 2014 to December 31st, 2016. And Steve, you've been reappointed, which is a good thing since you're chair, to in part as a neighborhood association representative, and your term is good through December 31st, 2016. And then Bob LaSalle, also an at-large position for the term January 1st, 2014 to December 31st, 2016. So at least the three of you will be here through 2016. And prior to that, last meeting we mentioned Williams' appointment as well. So those are the, and Henry. And so those are the, oh man, 4 new appointments and 1 old appointment.
3 new appointments and 2 reappointments.
1, 2, 3. Okay. Thanks, Kelly.
Welcome.
So anyway, yeah, welcome to the committee, and look forward
Both the
to
chair and the vice chair positions were in jeopardy
Not much.
until the reappointments.
And don't forget, you guys asked for it. And you're going to get it.
So we got to go through a dark tunnel and you're going to paddle us?
And there's no light either.
So anyway, I'm looking forward to, yeah, a couple of good years of discussion like we typically have. But so with that,
Okay,
Might want to note that every seat is taken.
that's true.
That's kind of nice.
And if,
full one
Yeah,
tonight.
it's great.
I think we're the only committee in the city with a full contingent of members.
yeah,
That's
and I,
Well,
cool.
You're going to start feeding us.
yeah, the city commission.
Urban renewal.
Less pizza to get around.
Okay, let's go to the South End Concept Plan.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. My name's Peter Walter, and I'm a planner with Oregon City Planning Division. I've been with the city now for 7.5 years. Thanks. Tonight, I know you have a full agenda, and I've tried not to inundate you with information, but I'm going to, by the end of my presentation, I hope that I will have helped you understand what the South End Concept Plan is supposed to do as a long-range planning document, and the level of transportation analysis that is done with a concept plan. And if you have any questions after this, please let me know.
And Pete, just
Yeah.
quickly, just a reminder, this is a topic that you folks asked for last meeting. I don't know, I told Pete, I said, well, maybe there's a summary version of the South End Concept Plan, because that's been a pretty hot topic at just about every meeting that the city's had. But there was specific reference to the Title 11 piece and trying to understand how that Title 11 piece affects the South End Concept Plan, and maybe more importantly, some of the traffic numbers. So that's all the direction I gave Pete, and he said, hey, and I gave it to him on Friday afternoon, so if he's missing something, it's my fault for making that a late request.
Excuse me, one other comment. Paul Edgar also raised some issues about traffic counts, and he gave a presentation, brief comments to the City Commission, and he had made handouts where he had done his own counts, gave me a copy of that, and told me as an aside, he says, I hope that the Traffic Commission is going to look at this, or the TAC is going to look at this. And I said, well, I expect that we will. And he says, and I hope that I'm invited. So he's been invited before, And I sent him an email today reminding him that it's on the subject, on the agenda tonight, so.
He stopped by the bike shop just before, about 4 o'clock, and said he couldn't make it. He gave me some material and tried to explain the traffic count system, and so,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. So probably helps to get the lay of the land. So I'd like to show you an overview map of the area that we're talking about.
We're working on it.
In the meantime, when people talk about the Metro Title 11, when we're planning for the area within the urban growth boundary that has not yet been annexed into Oregon City, it's an area of approximately 400 acres, and it is within the urban growth boundary, so it's been designated by the region as an area that is appropriate for urbanization in the future. And before that urbanization can take place, the city is required to do a concept plan, and that has to take place before any land can be proposed for annexation by private property owners. So the map that we're looking at here, can everybody see this?
Yes.
You can see the outer gray boundary is this Oregon City urban growth boundary. You can see the red dashed line is the Oregon City city limit, which is a little higgledy-piggledy. Then within that green area is what we're calling the study area. And that includes county land, a little bit of city land, including McLaughlin Elementary School. And it includes Forest Ridge Lane, Butel Road, Navajo Way, and Kalen Court, Impala Lane, and the subdivisions of Finnegan's Terrace, the ones that are in the city and the ones that are outside the city as well.
A question?
Yes.
This is the area that's basically on top of the hill there and not over the edge?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, it's mostly flat. The edges of the edges of the study area approximate where the topographic limits really are for buildable land, although there are some steep edges to this area. As you get west of here, you're into the Canandaigua Bluff Metro open space over here. And then as you dive off the hill and you come down to May Road, that's where the urban growth boundary ends.
Pete, why was it that big gap area there?
Well, when Metro studied urban growth boundary expansion in 2002, they initially drew a very large study area that went way beyond the current UGB expansion. It was about a 600-acre initial study area, and the actual 2002 expansion area was this crosshatched area. So the area that the Metro ultimately expanded the UGB to was about 2/3 the size, smaller than originally studied, and I think that may be due to sewer capacity as well as resource land constraints.
It looks rather conspicuous by its absence, doesn't it?
Well, when you turn on the contour layer and you look at some of these physical infrastructure issues associated with these parcels, it's easier to answer that question. Okay. So anyway, this is the 2002 expansion area, and according to Metro's Title 11, which is planning for new areas, when a city plans for urban growth within this 2002 expansion area, we have to provide for a net density of 10 units per acre of net developable land, and that means we have to apply a comprehensive plan designation that allows for the future capacity for redevelopment of the land at 10 units per acre. Now, they allow cities to substantially comply based on various factors. And so they allow not only that you can provide less than 10 units per acre by spreading that density out amongst the various areas that aren't subject to Title 11, which is what we've done. So the overall density that's shown on our plan is approximately 8 units per acre, and that is in compliance with the Metro Housing Rule, which is the state housing rule that requires a certain amount of capacity for zoned land within the urban growth boundary to meet housing needs of various types. Yeah.
Is the 10 units, is that referred to as R3
No, this is not zoning.
zoning? Okay.
No. When land is annexed, then you apply zoning, but
Got it.
10 units per acre net is, roughly, that's about a 3,500 acre lot. But the way you would mix that density, because this is an area that has a lot of low-density residential, and based on our public involvement process, which we spent a lot of time on, in fact, we think we spent the most of our money on the public involvement process, listening to people and understanding what is important to them. And it is clear that a transitioning of density from high-density areas along South End Road to low-density areas and low-density out towards the limits of this concept plan is what will help preserve the values that people hold dear in South End, while maintaining substantial compliance with Title 11. So the maps on the wall behind you and the map that I'll show you now reflect, as we start to drill down and actually talk about land use designations, the concept plan that is going before the Planning Commission right now looks like this. So the legend on the right shows the various residential housing types. You'll note the light yellow color is low density or large lot residential. The next darkest color is medium lot residential. And then closer to South End Road, you've got small lot residential and mixed use corridor. The actual zoning that accompanies these land use designations, in the Oregon City Comprehensive Plan, we have 3 zoning designations that we've had on the books since, I think, about 20 years longer. Low-density residential designation supports lot sizes of 10,000 to 8,000 to 6,000 square feet. Those are considered low-density residential lots in Oregon City under our current comprehensive plan and zoning code. Medium lot residential supports zoning of R5, which is 5,000 square foot lot minimum, and R35, which is 3,500 square foot lot minimum. So large lot and medium lot residential zones allow for detached single-family homes. Now, when you start getting into smaller lots, such as the R35, and then the high-density lots, which is apartments and multifamily, that's 2,000 square foot of land per dwelling unit, approximately 22 to 26 housing units per acre. So you mix these densities up. You provide a variety of zoning throughout your comprehensive plan area, and when land is annexed, then you apply the zoning designation to the applicable piece of ground. So there's a comprehensive plan that looks like this concept plan, and that's that map over to the right. And that's the official land use document for the city. And it has the 3 land use types for residential and a public land use type for parks and metro-owned land. And it also has the neighborhood commercial or mixed-use corridor zone for the 2 areas of the plan that are designated as future commercial uses. So that's the map.
Pete, when you say official land use document, are you saying zoning?
No.
Which is adopted by code or ordinance or?
Yeah, so this is the comprehensive plan map. So this is the map that would be adopted to implement the concept plan.
In other words, that's the proposed official.
Yeah, that's
land
the
use.
proposed, yeah.
Okay, all right.
And this is going through Planning Commission right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thanks, Bob.
Question?
Yes. Yeah.
Excuse me, on this map, there's, what are those little stubs that come out of those streets?
All right, so this is a conceptual map. All the maps that we show are conceptual. These show where future local road connections could go when land division occurs, based on a 200 by 200 foot block pattern, which is a design for a neighborhood block pattern with a fairly small block that is much more walkable and allows people to bicycle and walk to areas within the concept plan area. They're showing those stubs because on the larger vacant parcels, which are likely to be redeveloped, these are the areas where you can get better connection than is possible under existing developed conditions, because a lot of the development that was done out there in the 70s has cul-de-sacs and dead-end streets and those sorts of things where it's one way in and one way out. So part of the way that you alleviate local traffic conditions and trips is by creating that connectivity within the neighborhoods. And so that's where they're showing these stubs. There's another map in the plan which actually is more detailed and actually shows where these roads might go, subject to much more detailed planning when zoning and subdivision is proposed in the future.
It's been my understanding that the concept of transportation is this balance between activity and access, right? So this looks like it's great on access, but I don't see it, why would somebody want to walk out there other than for their health?
Right. So there's a number of maps in the concept plan. There's a trails map and a open space map, so they are all components of a full Title 11 plan. You not only have to provide for housing units, you also have to provide for parks and open space planning, natural resources planning, trails component for multimodal travel, and various other things.
Commercial services is what I'm thinking.
Commercial services in a Title 11 plan are supported. They're not required, but they do have a role here because these, if I go back to this map, what the consulting team attempted to show here was quarter-mile radius walkable areas. So these little blue circles that they're showing here are a quarter-mile to 5-minute walking radius from these neighborhood commercial zones and parks and those sorts of things.
What kind of amenities you're talking about when you say commercial services?
They're talking small-scale neighborhood commercial, which we have a neighborhood commercial zone in our zoning code, but are not on our maps. It hasn't been applied yet, and it's appropriate for the types of small-scale commercial uses that would be in these areas. So buildings larger than 10,000 square feet would be rare. It would support a grocery store up to 40,000 square feet if that occurs in the future. But they're not nearly the scale that would be permitted in the mixed-use corridor 1 zone along Malala Avenue, for example. It's a much less intense land use, and it was designated for the concept plan areas because they're talking about neighborhood amenities to serve adjacent residential areas, coffee shops, the type of use that people will want to walk to and which will have a role in reducing vehicle trips and reduces necessity for people to travel outside the concept plan area for their daily needs.
Bike shops.
Bike shops. Right. They also did a market study, because that's part of the requirement for Title 11, is that you do a market study for all the land use that you have, residential, commercial, and otherwise. And although this is not what people said they wanted out there, they do the analysis anyway based on household income and what's around in Oregon City and what people have to spend, and then they project that out based on what they know about the housing market in this area. And they show that there's adequate demand to support these types of neighborhood scale uses. But the amount of land that's shown for mixed use on this map is nowhere near what the market analysis supports. So it could be a lot more, but that's not what people want. And that's why we've justified substantial compliance to Metro based on, in large part, on the public outreach that was done and what we heard. So overall, we're talking about a plan which is much less dense than Metro would want mathematically. And I'll go into that a little more detail now.
Pete,
Yeah.
one of the things that I've heard is that they do want in walking
Mhm.
is safe sidewalks
Sure.
for kids getting off school buses
Mhm.
and for moms maybe taking their kids to the park.
Bike trails.
Absolutely.
bike route
It doesn't
lanes.
necessarily have to be a trail,
Right.
but it has to be a pedestrian amenity
Yeah.
to keep them separate from a car, to keep them safe.
So what the plan identifies are areas where sidewalks and trails are needed, and it makes a planning level estimate of the cost of those improvements so that you can build it into your capital improvement program. And it identifies McLaughlin Elementary School as a destination and some of the safety issues associated with that. It talks about it in great detail. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that because some of that, most of that comes with future development. And the parts that are not going to come with development, the city has to figure out a way to pay for. So if we apply for federal funding for safe routes to schools and that sort of thing to complete sections of sidewalk is in areas that aren't redeveloping, then we need to identify that as we go down the road, and the plan does an initial job of looking at that. So the multimodal aspects of the plan, you may have seen these with the latest transportation system plan update. So the hierarchy of street types that was discussed when the TSP was going through the adoption process are the same street types that we're talking about with the concept plan. Those are showing, and these improvements within the concept plan area are in the Oregon City Transportation System Plan, which dovetailed with this process. That includes the south end designation as a minor arterial street, which is the blue line, a provision for two collector level streets, one being what they call a family friendly street, and the other being a collector level street but not a family friendly street. What they're talking about there is the family friendly street has the option for a bike lane on it, which someone could use as an alternative to the collector level street and be more comfortable. That collector street connection to Central Point Road from the TSP is shown on the concept plan. We also have, I didn't show it here, but the roundabouts that are talked about in the TSP are also part of the concept plan as well. The local streets that are shown on this conceptual map, which are the black lines, you'll notice on the southwest part of the area, they've shown much greater connectivity because that's where the larger vacant redevelopable land is. And then you get less connectivity northeast of there where most of the existing development is happening, and you're not going to see much redevelopment there. But to the extent that they can, they tried to show a complete street grid for the 2002 expansion area. So that's the multimodal street system. This does not show the trails and pedestrian improvements that are shown on the trails and open space plan. And so that's that. Let's leave that up. I just want to draw your attention to these handouts I've provided now. So the first document I provided is called the, and I won't go into great detail on this, is our addendum to the Metro Title 11 compliance report. This is the density analysis that we submitted to Metro for substantial compliance.
Show us which sheet you're looking at.
That's the all-text document dated December 3rd, 2013, and it's called Staff Report Exhibit 10A.
Without the DKS?
No, it doesn't have any logo on it. So this document is what we submitted to Metro that talks about how we're providing for average residential density of 6.7 dwelling units per acre throughout the study area. Now, Metro requires that cities assume a 20% underbuild, meaning a city must assume that a developer is not going to build to 100% of his zone capacity. So if you build in this underbuild factor, that takes us down from 8 units per acre to 6.7 units per acre. Now, we know from looking back at history in the last 6 years of subdivisions and rezoning proposals in Oregon City that this underbuild never happens in Oregon City. Developers maximize the developable area of their land. Subsequently, the underbuild factor is somewhat erroneous in Oregon City, and we made that case to Metro. Realistically, this means that we have a plan which provides 8 units per acre overall. The only way that it could really get to 6.7, down to 6.7 units per acre overall is if a developer voluntarily decided they didn't want to build 100% of their allowable density. So I wanted to tell you that. So what realistically we're talking about a range of housing units between 2,200 and 2,600 overall in a variety of zoning designations. Now, the traffic analysis has to assume the worst case scenario. So when Metro says 10 units per acre, we said, well, that's 2,800 units that we've got to do traffic analysis for. So DKS did their analysis for 2,886 housing units. And they also analyzed the market available land of 340,000 square feet. And so I'm pointing now to the DKS report with the black and white logo on the top, and that's dated December 23rd. And in this document, DKS summarized the land use assumptions for this concept plan and explained the difference between the TSP update, which was 2,580 or 2,580 housing units, and the concept plan update, which is 2,886 units based on the Metro requirement. Now, they also go into the methodology for the analysis. And as you know, this is a subject of concern. The transportation demand modeling that was done for the concept plan is based on the regional Metro regional transportation demand model. And DKS does a pretty good job of bullet pointing how that's done in this report. First, they update the street network data citywide to assume all funded and likely to be funded arterial and collector streets in Oregon City. And that model street network was utilized as a starting point for this 2035 modeling that they do. The next thing that they do is identify the land use within this area, and based on 2010 and 2035 land use, they assume growth in Oregon City and surrounding region.
Pete, not to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
to interrupt you.
Yeah.
DKS is more or less obliged to comply with Metro's methodology and region-wide traffic modeling, as we are to Title 11 with our housing.
Correct. They use a model that is applicable to all cities within the metro boundary. It's based on, and John chime in here, the VISUM computer model, which makes an assumption of all these things, and they're looking at what's called transportation area zones as well. So these are zones within the city and abutting the city that are sources of traffic generation in 2035.
Well, I'm not trying to start a bonfire over this.
Oh, okay.
You've got
Yeah.
two different documents here,
Right.
which seem to be problematic in a sense.
Okay.
That one originates from one technique and another originates from another, but the other is more or less the official region-wide accepted model by Metro, right?
Correct. And the reason why this is considered a much more accurate model for large-scale transportation planning when you're looking at citywide growth and traffic generation. So they look at overall number of dwelling units, projected retail growth citywide, and employment growth citywide as well. And they also make an assumption of driving habits in 2035. So that is what, and we are going to explain this more with the Planning Commission as well, to talk more about that methodology. But this is the accepted methodology. And they distribute the trips that come out of this methodology onto the street network, and that's based on number of vehicles entering or leaving the transportation analysis zones, and then they assign a travel route to those trips based on this model. So that's how it's done. I can't go into great detail on the methodology because I don't have the training, but I can talk about what else was done to follow up on this. We asked DKS to prepare this document, which I just explained, and we also asked Replinger and Associates, which is the city's development review engineer for the last 15 years, to give us examine the methodology for the concept plan and tell us what they thought. So we sent everything that's been submitted into the record so far to John Replinger, including the plan itself, the transportation element, which is Appendix C, and I've included the first 8 pages of the transportation element, which is the colored DKS logo. The technical memorandum, which is the model and the assumptions from the transportation system plan and how that was prepared. The other TSP plan technical memo, which is the future traffic modeling, the performance of the major street network. The transportation planning rule compliance memorandum, which is the statewide requirements as far as how a city's local traffic impacts a statewide facility and roadway. And finally, the traffic counts from various intersections. So the map that I've included here, Figure 1, this map shows the intersections both within and outside of the concept plan area that were analyzed. And they looked at peak hour trip generation. They analyzed the South Parish Road, Butel Road intersection within the concept plan area. Then they analyzed Partlow Road, South End Road. They analyzed Partlow, Central Point, McCord Road and Central Point. They analyzed South End Road as it intersects with Warner Parrott. They analyzed Warner Parrott as it intersects with Central Point Road, Leland Road, and the five-legged intersection that we know of in Warner Milne Road.
So that gives you historical data based on what is currently there.
Yeah, when you read this document, basically there's numbers. There's a number that is included. They have the right turn, the through movement, and the left turn. And then the number in parentheses is the change with the concept plan for the number of trips. Okay, so that's how that works. If I could turn your attention to the back of Appendix C here and explain these intersections and how they function.
Both of those, just to point out, both of those numbers, the number that's outside the parentheses and the number that's inside the parentheses, are based on future Future projections.
Future
Okay,
projections.
so sometimes we see these and there's a current and a future. In this case, both of those numbers represent future. It's just one is the 2530 and TSP base case, which I think they've mostly looked at kind of they didn't have this level of detail in the TSP. So that number turned out to be lower. And now that they have the more detailed information, there's the 2035 number that's in parentheses that looks like in most cases is a higher number. So just to be clear about that.
Does this incorporate the addition of any new outlet roads? I know there was a.
This includes connectivity, all the connectivity that you see here on this map.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think they've run the model based on optimized neighborhood connectivity.
And then someone told me that South End Road, they were. It's in the. I must have missed it, but they were going to make that 3 lanes.
Yeah, now the street sections in the concept plan that is in draft form are specific to the area within the concept plan. They're talking about a mixed-use corridor, which is like a 3-lane section, but the inner lane would either be a turning lane or a landscape median, depending on where it is. So
I'm just thinking
yeah.
about
Like Malala Avenue.
A little bit like Malala Avenue, where it goes through those 2 mixed-use areas, it would be designed more urban, so there would be a cycle track there to get through the commercial area. It would provide good separation between the parking lane where the cars could park and somebody on a bicycle can be right next to the sidewalk and get off and park, and it won't interfere with the cars that want to park as well. So when you're getting into these 2 neighborhood commercial zones in the future, it's going to be a little bit wider section to accommodate that. And then when you get into the residential sections between the 2 areas, it's a little bit narrower section, but still 3 lanes.
And the 3 lanes
Yeah.
make total sense to me if it's like
Yeah.
Malala in the flat area, but when you're heading down on that sloped area going down to 2nd Avenue, how is that going to work?
Right. So we didn't look at the area north of
Warner
Parrott.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's a separate issue.
Okay.
Yeah, and the capacity of the roadway is not a concern. There are concerns with respect to the underlayment of the road and that sort of thing. But in terms of the overall vehicle capacity, now let me talk about the intersections once you get out of there. So
I have a question. So
Yeah.
it looks like that they use the volume to capacity ratio rather than the level of service. And it says that, in essence, with that, the city is accepting higher
yeah.
or more congestion
Yeah,
than
thank you.
before. So there'll be, essentially, it's forcing more traffic, less improvements to be made. Just
Thank you,
accepting
yeah.
more congestion.
So the list of improvements, because the city region-wide, you're seeing what they're calling a flattening of the peaks, where people are starting to spread their trips out beyond the normal peak hour. And so that's exactly right. We're accepting more congestion, and the list of improvements that was on the TSP and the concept plan is slightly shorter because of that. However, we did a level of service analysis based on the improvements. So you'll see all of the intersections that were analyzed, McLaughlin, South 2nd, with the exception of 3 of them, all of the intersections that were analyzed operate acceptably with the exception of 99E and South End Road and 2nd, and Warner Parrott and Central Point Road without the improvements in the TSP. When you include the TSP improvements for lane markings, intersection lighting, and those sorts of things, roundabouts, all of those improvements, the levels of service improved to within acceptable ranges. Now, the McLaughlin Boulevard and 99E indicates the intersection exceeds the volume to capacity mobility target with a level of service F, and that's the ODOT and Clackamas County identified that same issue in their transportation analysis as well. So that's something that we're going to just have to accept as a region with McLaughlin South End Road unless we can find an alternative way to mitigate. Now, the alternative way to mitigate for these congestions that ODOT and the city and the county is working on is to build better mobility into your transportation system, such as pedestrian improvements, bike lanes, transportation demand, so that your employer could allow you to travel to work a little later and go home a little later or earlier, and those sorts of things.
A question.
Yeah.
Has consideration been given to TriMet to reinstate the South End bus?
Right. So transit is another issue as well. It's part of the analysis here. You guys have probably been briefed a little bit on the TriMet discussion. It's the recommendation in the plan is to explore all options with TriMet and with other districts that might be able to serve South End. The legal reality of us opting out of TriMet may be a little more problematic. I don't know all of the details of that, but we've been asked by the City Commission to continue conversations with TriMet in this regard, because it really has to do with TriMet's long-term fiscal outlook and their service enhancement plan, which John's going to be talking about later on tonight as well. So re-engaging the communities and actually looking at which routes can be reinstated is going to be another discussion that TriMet's going to have with the city. I know a big factor of that is ridership. We can't justify it if we don't have the riders.
And you can't justify it without the bus.
That's exactly right. However, the alternatives that we discussed in the plan are what options for public-private partnership might there be based on future land uses, for example, assisted living facilities in this area that are supported by the zoning. You can do assisted living facilities in all of the low-density residential zones, all the medium residency zones. Depending on the size of the facility, it might need a planning commission conditional use hearing to get approved. But those are certainly things that are in demand as the population ages, and which have a much more attractive transit option as well. So that's a possibility. We've got the Pioneer Community Center who runs a shuttle service to needy citizens. And then the other recommendation in the plan is to discuss with Canby Area Transit what option might be. The other discussion that's coming out of the current conversation with TriMet has to do with a jump type system where you do an extra leg in and out that comes to a main line, which is a little more cost effective. And that may be something we follow up on as we proceed down the path. But for the purpose of the concept plan, I think the level of transportation or transit recommendation is pretty good. It's a big picture plan. It's a 20-year plan. Any land use in the future is going to require. It's going to have been through the voter-approved annexation process, so there's plenty of opportunity for further input on future planning here. This is the first step, is adopting a concept plan. I want to just go back to where we worked so hard to reach out to the community and get input on what kind of place they want this to be in the future. We had a 14-member citizen advisory team. Bob was on that committee, and Robert's been on for the Planning Commission and been to a lot of the meetings. People don't like change. That's not why they bought in an area. They may not have known every nuance of Title 11 or the urban growth boundary when they bought their house in South End. And if they bought it prior to 2002, they didn't necessarily know that the urban growth boundary was going to go out beyond it. So, yeah, there's a lot of unknowns here. I think what the planning process did was allow people to really focus in on, if growth is going to happen, I want to say in how it happens and what areas need to be preserved. I think, based on the 4 public open houses we did and 17 community conversations on all the online forums, we had various concepts put forward. And the final concept that was selected through this process was this one. And there were a lot of changes made to the original 3 concepts before we got to this plan. And so I feel that it reflects pretty well what the community advisory team and the community wanted out of this process. Yeah.
Just to clarify, just jumping back real quick,
Yeah.
when you talk about McLaughlin and South End, you're talking about where South End comes to second, and then at the Still House there. Okay. Just to clarify.
And South Second and High, and Center and High, where the Public Works facility are. So there's lighted intersection improvements there. Signalization are called out in the TSP to handle the build out, and we're pretty confident that those improvements are going to be adequate to support this traffic in 2035. The question then becomes, we've identified a funding gap, and now we have to fill that gap in an equitable way. So how to fund those improvements without burdening existing taxpayers. And
Well,
so,
even
yeah.
educating new
Yeah.
residents on, or existing residents on alternative routes. You
Mm-hmm.
could tie into Central Point and then across to Myers, Leland and Myers Road out to 213, and be on 213 and hit the jug handle, and that would be, rather than get caught up in downtown Oregon City, would be, that's the way I'd
Right.
go if I lived in South End.
Yeah, and
Once or twice.
we're not sure when this collector route gets built, but most likely the first annexations and development will occur closer to where existing sewer facilities already are. Now, where I'm waving my mouse here is Finnegan's Terrace subdivision, which is a county subdivision. It's not going to redevelop, so the likelihood is that people will continue to use existing connections, Parish Road and such. This connection, the conceptual collector road here, is going to be it's going to be crossing a ravine at the narrowest point, which is also a wetland. It'll require a lot of engineering and environmental review. Not to mention that it's currently shown within the urban reserve area, which is not within the Oregon City UGB. So Metro has to expand the UGB or we need to come to some agreement with Metro in order to get that road built. All that notwithstanding, it needs to be there if it's going to provide an alternative route for this area. Because South End Road today is not going to provide all the transportation capacity that this area needs as it develops. But these alternative connections and the expansion of the existing system will. That's what our analysis shows.
I'm curious, how would this change, let's say, if the light rail to come to Oregon City?
Oh, good question.
When
I think
if
the light
just
rail
curious.
comes down from Milwaukee and comes into our downtown in some point in the future, then I would assume by that time, we will have a much more advanced plan for transit to the Oregon City Transit Center, and we'll be able to hopefully springboard off that. I think it would reduce the single occupancy vehicle traffic for commuters going into Portland, hopefully. We don't know yet. We have to do that analysis, but it's a little far off for us to say. I think when it does come in, we'll be updating the transportation system plan to account for it.
Well, I just a couple things we're off a little bit,
Sorry.
but It's still in the long-range plan for TriMet. I think they're reevaluating that, given some of the feedback they've heard from Clackamas County. And my sense is that that might take the priority off of Clackamas County and put it somewhere else for a while. But it's still on the long-range plan.
And John, don't you think a lot of that will depend on once the Milwaukee line is in, and people get used to it, or how they, if it turns out to be hitting the ball out of the park and everybody loves it, that may
Make a difference.
make a difference.
Yeah.
But it's going to go somewhere.
So we've I don't know how you want to play this out, but there's a couple more questions,
Quick question, you mentioned you had identified a funding gap for those projects that need city money to do the CIP for the transportation. A chicken and egg question. So if you haven't been able to identify that, does that stop the potential development in its tracks or no?
By the time we get to annexation of these properties, I think we have to have identified at that point a funding source for the annexed land to serve the transportation system. That's really where you look hard at your current CIP, and we identify the need for the improvement in the concept plan, but annexation would be the reasonable point at which we look at that hard again. The way our annexation
code...
If
you couldn't identify...
Because pardon?
If you couldn't identify a revenue source that was also reliable?
If we couldn't identify it and tie it to a funded transportation improvement, we wouldn't recommend annexation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just for clarification, CIP?
Oh, capital improvement program, I believe.
Pete, I got a question. It's more or less along the lines of procedure. Planning Commission is going to have to recommend to the City Commission this either, as I see it at least, either the DKS analysis or the one submitted by Paul Edgar.
Okay.
And if they have to make the choice between the two, then they're going to have to choose between complying with Metro, because DKS fits the model, or have some finding that Paul's figures override DKS's analysis.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to have to make a choice somewhere along the line just to keep things
Sure.
flowing.
Bob, maybe let me take a stab at this one. I see this overarching modeling that happens around the region being, the 3,000 foot level review of traffic numbers, and it's been proven to be provide good information for planning. The lower level, which is kind of some of the ITE manual review that we hear about, is something that we apply when the development actually comes through, and we look at those developments individually, and we, out of that comes more detailed recommendations on what could be required, and there's more discussion about how a development could change. I compare that to pipeline modeling, if you will. So you do a large-scale model of sewer collection system, for instance. You might plug in some inputs that would be similar to what you would do if you were doing a much more focused analysis of a drainage basin. But those larger scale models take into consideration what that system can really take with regard to surcharge. So it's kind of like it allows it to back up a little bit and then flow off, right? A narrower model that really kind of looks at just the basin and says, using this amount of flow per unit, you're going to have a capacity problem because the pipe's going to be full. So I know you probably aren't used to sewer modeling either. I know Sedimere is real familiar with that. But I guess what I'm saying is the larger model gives you the option of taking that existing transportation system and letting it fill up just a little bit, back up a little bit, and move that traffic through the system. It's much better at that than, say, the ITE manual kind of analysis. And it's proven over time to be still pretty conservative. The other things that it doesn't necessarily fully take into account is the future and what might happen in the future with regard to rideshare or transit. It takes some of that into consideration. Bike paths. South End is likely to see a bike path that'll take bike traffic from the Hilltop to the Kanema area, and or down to 99E where there may be another bus service there. This neighborhood connectivity definitely takes into consideration, but I think what we're seeing is you're seeing that in a utility system, you often have to design that for Super Bowl Sunday, right? When everybody flushes at the same time, and you have to build to that particular capacity.
That's a good analogy.
I think I think that's what we typically see with those smaller review of a particular subdivision. But again, that larger scale model just kind of allows that system to fill up a little bit and see where other people go. Mm-hmm. If you've got backed up traffic every morning on South End Road as you get on your way to work, likelihood is, well, first of all, the other point that I would say is Oregon City residents aren't really used to traffic. They don't know what traffic is. If you commute to the other side of the metro area, you know a lot more about what traffic congestion is.
I just drove in from Beaverton.
So there's that piece, but there's the other piece, which Pete was talking about earlier. You kind of flatten that transportation out over time, and you start realizing, well, if I leave my house at 7:15 and I'm stuck in a lot of traffic, then I'm going to change my route, see about what my employer will allow me. Maybe I can get there instead of getting there at 8, I can get there at 7. I'll leave at 6:15 and come home an hour earlier. So it's a bit of a shell game, or not a shell game, right? It's a bit of a game that allows
everybody's taking a chance.
And people figure that out, and that's where I think the pure ITE kind of manual piece is a little flawed. I also think that over time, if we could build good connectivity and get parents to feel safer with their communities, have better volunteer programs where we weren't so worried about sending.
When you say better,
John and Jane Doe.
You're not referring to us, are you? You say better. I mean,
as a community, we get better at finding ways to schools, for instance. I mean, at the same hour that people are backed up in traffic, that's pretty much the same hour that we have neighborhood traffic trying to get to their local schoolyard and clogging things up. When you have a neighborhood layout like this, maybe even on wet winter days, you'll have, parent networks that are willing to get their children to school in a different way. Or what was that? There was that walking bus program, something like that. We talked about that a few months ago. Mm-hmm. And the model doesn't take all that into effect, and yet there's so much potential for gain there that I think people forget about those programs. So
I would agree with John. I think you have to really look at those models at the larger scale at these levels, and then you get to refine them as you go down. And so there's a potential that you could see higher numbers of traffic, but in reality, that will be all limited to what the network is originally designed to, and without really having to refine that, you're not going to see the substantial change.
Well, I want to say one thing, and then I'll shut up, and I hope that John Anderson understands me, but and I think he will, as being an administrator. I think the plan is as best as we're going to come up with, given everything that's taken place with public input and the analysis that we've had to date. I think the plan will be adopted by the Planning Commission and the City Commission. But in terms of process, I think in order to have a stream of what happened when and who did what, that I think we ought to recommend to the Planning Commission or to the Commission that as part of the concept plan, that the DKS findings be included officially, because this document is going to go to Metro for final adoption, if I understand or acceptance.
It already has, and Metro has made a finding of substantial compliance.
Okay.
So now it's really up to the city.
Okay, so
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
has this document here
Yes.
been included?
Yeah, all of these documents are already part of the record.
Then I think we ought to be consistent with our acceptance of the findings and figures. And this plan is going to evolve over time. It's not going to happen overnight. And as it evolves, it'll change. And the administration is going to have to adopt and change some of its policies and approaches to funding and land acquisition for right-of-way, on and on and on. That's the way things happen in government.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that once the city commission adopts the comprehensive plan amendment and the plan itself, that will guide land use in the future, and we don't want to make changes to the comp plan unless we have a really good, compelling public reason to.
Right.
That's a little different than implementing the concept plan at the site-specific level.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
at the site-specific level, the ITE methodology, modeling will come more into play. Right now, it's not really an issue.
Sure, if you have a 15-acre site that has a medium-density residential land use designation on it, and the owner wants to propose it for annexation, we will ask for a transportation impact analysis that conforms to our guidelines for transportation impact analysis, and they're going to have to make an assumption, worst-case scenario land use, whether or not they're proposing a subdivision at that time or not. And most of the time, when they annex land, they're just bringing the property in to change the boundary of the city limit. After that, they'll come in with a zoning request to actually implement medium density. It might be R35 or R5. We'll analyze it even further at that point, because now we have a zoning that we can assume a certain number of specific land use unit or land use, and then we'll have a development associated with it, which will either be a subdivision or a site plan if it's in the commercial area. And then you're really drilling down to details and talking about square footage, number of units, and the chirp generation from the ITE chirp manual associated with that.
So what was that? Someone here made a comment that the county could, I don't know, it sounded like the county could come in and say, well, we don't accept any of this. But what's the county's role in this process?
Well, Karen Bierig from the county transportation, she's the transportation coordinator for the county, has been on our technical advisory team throughout the process, and they were dovetailing their transportation system plan update with our TSP update. So I think it was good coordination there. They're pretty happy with the plan. They don't see any issues with the intersections outside the concept plan area that haven't already been identified in the county TSP. So I think that's been addressed.
My comments were aimed at having things dovetailed,
Right.
so that there's no question as to whose role was not heard and
Right.
yada, yada, yada. But my intent when I applied for the transportation from the planning commission was to have a little interface here. And I think if the transportation board here recommended to the planning commission that this document be included in their findings, that it would coincide with the commission's adoption and everything would dovetail, and there wouldn't be any question as to that aspect of it. It just makes the administration of things and the record of what happened and who did what a little bit more unified in a sense. That's my thinking.
Okay, can we do a summary to end this
Right.
up real quick?
So to summarize, all the documents that we've provided to you are currently in the record. We are expecting some additional response from DKS. They will be explaining the methodology in more detail at the next Planning Commission hearing and at the next City Commission hearing. So there's further stuff going to be in the record. We're going to Planning Commission, back to Planning Commission on February 10th. And then our second city commission hearing is going to be in February 19th. So that's when we're doing it.
So Kathy and I look back on the record. At one point in time, the Transportation Advisory Committee made a motion to recommend the Transportation Advisory Committee's, I guess, approval of or buy-in of the concept plan. That may have been a little premature, given that we're just now kind of getting before the Planning Commission. I still think that. I think that it would be good to kind of reinforce that with a second round of a motion, if this group's willing to do that, or if the motion from the floors comes available, that would be helpful, I think, Pete, would it not, to go before the Planning Commission with a new motion to
Certainly
recommend
be
approval?
helpful if the Transportation Advisory Committee would like additional information. I'm happy to provide it, that's up to your call.
You mentioned, Peter, excuse me, that DKS is going to be providing additional information.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out where to find the staff and resources for them to do that. But
yeah, and
we've
to
asked
assimilate all that. So what I'm suggesting is perhaps we could craft a motion where the TAC would support the existing plan, dependent upon any new information coming from DKS's for additional analysis.
I think what they're going to be providing is a little more explanation as to which transportation area zones apply for South End. They'll be talking about the difference between the IT methodology and this in their own language.
So we're not expecting any bomb.
It's not really going to be
What I'm
new.
just suggesting is that we could make a motion that says that the TAC accepts this concept plan, subsequent to any additional information that may be uncovered.
Is that your motion?
So moved.
And basically, what we're talking about here is, as a committee, we've reviewed the DKS.
Maybe we should have a second before the discussion.
I would second that motion.
Okay, discussion.
Thank you.
Did you get that?
From a transportation standpoint, are we in agreement that this is acceptable? The analysis is acceptable, and I think that's the main issue, that the modeling being done is up to high standard, and it's good information. And
I think
I agree, because this plan is speaking of going out to 2035. I would be amazed if that whole area was developed by 2035.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very slow process. As the problems crop up, solutions are going to be found. It's a development as it goes along, and I can't see this gloom and doom traffic problems that have been brought up by some
Right away.
people, because it's an evolutionary process.
I concur.
And
I think we're going to be fine.
And the track record of some of the annex that we've been doing hasn't been going through as fast as we hoped. I've seen the prior, elections before, and it may be slow and it may happen.
I have a quick question. So one of the things we just recently went through was updating the transportation plan. And so I guess the question for us is, since we spent a lot of time on that as an advisory committee, is this in keeping with the transportation plan for this area? And if it isn't, where are the major exceptions? So if this plan, if you're saying this fits the TSP as we developed it over the last 2 years for this area, then I'm comfortable. Otherwise, I don't know. Because we just saw it tonight.
Yeah, so based on Appendix C, which was the initial transportation element that DKS did, where they identified where the intersection problems were and how they would be fixed, then this memorandum, which explains the additional trips that would develop under the worst-case scenario with metro density, and the same intersection improvements accommodate those additional 400 trips under the worst-case scenario, and it can handle it. They did the analysis again, they ran the model again, and everything worked according to the volume to capacity and LOS.
Piece for break, that's the December 23, 2013 memo?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and then that was subsequently analyzed by Replinger and Associates. All of this documentation was subsequently analyzed by Replinger and Associates and accepted as a good methodology.
Okay. Do
Another
we
question?
call for question? And either you read it or Kathy, do you know what, can you read the motion? Make sure everybody is on the right.
Exactly.
I was going to go back and listen to the record. I have that
The
one
motion
here.
is that the TAC support the South End concept plan, subject to any new information that could be brought by the DKS.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I asked a quick question about wordsmithing. We're the transportation element of the
Yes.
South End plan,
I
right?
accept that as a friendly
The
amendment.
transportation element of the South End plan. That's what we're acting on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. I was trying to figure out how to.
Now, the second needs to accept that
William,
friendly
would that
amendment.
include DKS?
Yeah,
Yes,
I
I-
agree. I second with that amendment.
Okay. The
Now-
changes, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Clarification, John, thank you.
Good presentation, Pete.
Nice job.
Pete.
Keep seeing your
And he did
emails
that.
all the time.
Like I said, he did that with Friday afternoon kind of
You
request.
say, you say you're not trained, but I sure as heck hate to keep up
Hey,
with you.
Pete, where's the rest of these 26 pages? Is that online available?
It's online.
Okay, John, you're up on.
Included the first 8 because the other 8 were all street standards and bike lanes and various other things which are of interest to the TAC, and I'll be happy to provide those to you.
But if they're online, we can look at them at our leisure.
Yeah, I'll send you a direct link, then you have to
Thank you,
search. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, John Lewis, Public Works Director.
I just have a couple of things to go over, and some are good updates, others are kind of mediocre updates. But the Betty had brought up the concern about Central Point and Warner Parrott Road, and just how traffic backs up at that location, and prohibits at times people trying to get out of Central Point onto Warner Parrott, or people trying to get into the driveway for the little market there. And so I had committed to our crew getting out and kind of taking a look at that, see if there was some signage or some striping changes. That at this point hasn't happened, but we're still planning to take a closer look at that. So that's just, I just put it on the agenda. And Martin couldn't make tonight's meeting because he's working with the artist on the Illuminate Oregon City project, just kind of fine-tuning that a little bit for tomorrow's event. So I excused him from this meeting, and to be honest with you, I didn't really ask him whether or not him and the crew had gone out and looked at that. So that's kind of where we're at with that. I would say I drive that regularly, though, and again, it's kind of back to this: are people in Oregon City really used to traffic delays? I kind of think they're not. And I know that there's some backup there, but it's whenever I've experienced it, and that's been at peak hours, not that bad. So
It's all relative.
it's all relevant. Anyway, Illuminate Oregon City, the project that Steve mentioned earlier, it's actually the slideshows or the artwork is actually up. So they ran it last night and they're running it tonight. So it's not like a flip the switch kind of event. It's more like celebrating the artist and learning more about the artist and acknowledgement of some of the people that were involved with that. And they're going to have food and beer and wine down on 7th Street.
You had me a beer and wine.
They're actually closing.
Provided by the city?
Pay as you go.
Should enhance the illumination experience.
Yeah, it should be a beautiful but cold evening. If it's anything like tonight, it'll be clear. We're closing 7th from Main Street to the tunnel, and Railroad from 6th Street to basically 8th. So should be a good time. There's going to be music there, and anyway,
So
show
it's
for that.
on right now, so we could
It is actually. So I'm planning, because I haven't seen it yet, I'm planning to venture down there because I don't know the content of that movie or artwork. And I know it's a lot of pictures and videos and hopefully done in an artistic way that we all kind of appreciate.
John, someone was asking me today about the one-year contract. When the contract is up, as I understand, we will own all the projection equipment.
Right.
And we will have the training by that time to be able to program it ourselves, put up our new work, and so on.
Well,
what happens after the first year?
Okay, so the bottom line is all the equipment is the city's. It is the city's now, and will be the city's at the end of that. So the artist and her support team are monitoring that throughout this year. So any problems that go up, they have actually got the ability. She lives back in Kansas someplace, so or Kentucky. Sorry, not Kansas, Kentucky. And so she can monitor that remotely. And so the question about training is an interesting one, but we should know enough about that to be able to either utilize that same contractor or do it ourselves.
Now that Public Works is in charge of art, yeah.
That's
It could be a good
that's
thing.
true.
Yeah.
It really kind of is.
Could be worse.
And at what point are we going to allow commercial advertising?
No advertising. No, I don't think we're going to allow advertising. I think,
Small
Steve,
flags.
your item is been brought up before. Our sense is it's not going to be. I've seen some of this videography kind of stuff. It's a little more subtle, so it'll be lit, but I don't necessarily know it's going to be such a distraction.
You're telling us that it will not be the MODA elevator?
No.
Melody, it works. I mean, she brought it up. She's the one that almost run the light.
Okay. The Oak Tree, well, we've got it listed here, Oak Tree Terrace. So the street you're talking about is Oak Tree Terrace, but I believe the dead end is Oak Tree Drive.
Well, we know what we're talking about anyway.
Okay. It's not?
It's not.
Somehow I got
not.
Drive out of there.
Yeah.
But so the little dead end off of Oak Tree Terrace. So Martin has been looking at this. We're thinking if we were to do something there, we'd rather than Jersey barriers or something hard to place like that, we'd rather have a gate.
Right.
One thing that came up recently is that's a private driveway or private property. So, and it's for sale. So for those of you that aren't familiar with this particular area, there's a dead end road that's been long. It's a dead end access to a multifamily development there that has never really developed. So I think it was partially built in 2008 or 9 and has sat vacant ever since. It's kind of on a steep slope area and going to be a challenge to develop. So that's been this little dead end access point that I think there's been some trash collection back there and kind of a neighborhood nuisance. And so the question is if we were to gate it, it's private property, and how does that work out? So we haven't come to a full solution there, but we are looking at
But
prices.
the street isn't private property, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think a gate would be better, because if there was a fire in the brush down there, fire
Yeah, they could
department
still
could
get
go
to
over.
that.
Then they could build it as a gated community.
And then the last thing is just an update on the Kenema neighborhood and the idea of putting some kind of radar system down there to document some speeds and kind of remind the neighbors of speed. So we do have a location along Fifth Avenue, which is near Paul Edgar's house, where we're going to be rotating our speed signs like we do in other neighborhoods. So that'll be a location that should help to remind people that neighborhood speeding isn't preferred. And so that should go in place fairly soon. That's another thing that Martin and crew are working on. So, and Paul's aware of the changes. So that's all I had.
How about that crosswalk over here?
That's had run into some delays for a couple reasons. For one, trying to remember what all the reasons are. There's one, we wanted that to be solar powered, and we didn't have the solar powered panels. So that was one problem.
Talking about 7th and Adams?
7th and Adams. So we're looking at crossing that street with some conduits to get connected, so that was a concern because we didn't include that in our pricing. And then there was a miscommunication on the right equipment to order, so there's a variety of things that are going on there. But we're still planning on putting one in there. We're just not sure when.
Would you dig through the street or bore under?
We were talking about boring, since it's fairly new. Okay, so do we go to the next item, Steve?
TriMet Service Enhancement Plan.
So at the January 7th Commission work session, we invited TriMet staff to come to that meeting, and they were there. I know, William, you were in the audience. I think, Bob, were you in that meeting as well?
No, but I watched it on the video.
Okay.
I came in for a little.
That's right. Sedemare was there. I would say I was glad they were there. I thought they did a good job of being there. I think that meeting went a little bit sideways or a little bit south on them. And, you know, a lot of that's got to do with just the community's kind of frustration with TriMet, and they're cutting of routes and you know, documenting whether or not we've got ridership or not. And then, you know, there was what the topic came up about their changes with the new light rail that comes to Milwaukee, and how maybe that would take buses that basically go from Morgan City straight into Portland and require them to stop and unload at the transit center there for the light rail line, and then passengers would have to get off the bus onto light rail and then take that the rest of the way into Portland. So I think TriMet maybe wasn't so much expecting to have that conversation or ready to have that conversation yet, but it did kind of come out, and I'm glad it did, because I had heard about it earlier, and I thought that was probably one of the biggest downfalls of that light rail plan. A lot of people like being on one vehicle and going all the way there, don't like the idea of having to transfer and maybe sit back out in the cold again. So
That's what happened in Hillsborough and Beaverton. You know, they took a lot of routes off us, so here we have it here.
right,
They didn't go into Portland anymore.
yeah.
So it would be
I-
great if they take those buses and then enhance the service. So like if they came back in Oregon City, say, okay, now we're got more service to bring more people, that would be a great thing.
Yes.
More direct route from here to the town center instead of having to go to Milwaukee to the town center. You know, that's what people look at.
Well, one thing that I find myself frustrated with is, I don't use that system
Right.
well enough, and we really don't have a transportation department. So just kind of studying routes, knowing what's problematic, knowing what works, what doesn't work, is an area that the city has. We don't really have that staffed well enough to figure some of those things out, and. But I know some of you do. I know Betty, for one, was one who kind of suggested that she might know a little bit about that. I don't know if she's still interested in kind of troubleshooting that. But it feels to me like, well, first of all, this Southeast service plan that TriMet's putting together is exactly that, trying to figure out how to reconfigure their bus service so that it supports that rail system and the communities around it differently. And what I kind of heard from TriMet was what they would like to redistribute those differently. And they've put together this group that wants to get more information from the community. I think right now is exactly the right time to start providing that kind of rider input, community input that they need. There's been an outreach effort on TriMet's part to kind of get the cities that are in jurisdictions that are in the area to kind of participate with that. What I heard from them was that they were looking for even community members. I thought, well, this might be a good spot for our Transportation Advisory Committee to participate, especially those that either use the bus or are familiar with the bus service. The one thing that I noticed in there, so we included this bus service plan for 2015, their outreach plan. I don't really see Oregon City on the list, so that's one little problem. But they are reaching out to us, and I think they're definitely looking for online comments. They've got an online comment form. I think that would be a good approach. And if there is a committee member or a subcommittee that we would like to assign to this, what I heard from them, what I heard from TriMet was that they want to start reaching out to those groups and having those kind of conversations. So I guess I'd float that out there. We don't need an answer today, but we need one probably before our next meeting. So
I'd like to find out why we're not on that stakeholders list. Now, that's a pretty glaring omission as far
Being a
as
regional
I'm
center,
concerned.
a designated regional center, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's,
They take a lot of money out.
I looked at that thing and it just smacked me right in the face. I think they ought to be asked that question, John.
okay.
And if you read the language in that second memo they sent out there, it's in the packet there, looking at the headings, making sure bus and light rail service work together, consideration for bus service changes. I mean, I just get the impression that there's going to be some long-haul direct buses that are going to be eliminated in lieu of transfer to light rail, and how that's going to play out for Oregon City is anybody's guess. But, you know, I don't see how they can operate the same number of buses as they did before, even if their routes are slightly different, when they add all the operating costs for the light rail out there. So it
I think
seems
that's
like-
their point too, and whether there's an efficient way of making those changes happen. I think TriMet is saying that they aren't necessarily interested in duplicating services with rail and buses. Is that a fatal flaw?
Which is another way of saying all the you had direct routes now will have a transfer to light rail in Milwaukee.
We have to have someplace where there's jobs. There's not, downtown Portland is not where all the jobs are. Tualatin, out to Beaverton, you want to go there, but you don't want to have to go downtown Portland to get on, to keep changing, to get all the way out to.
I brought this up to TriMet a decade ago, and their answer at that point was, we don't provide service outside the urban growth boundary area, and in order to provide service from Oregon City to Tualatin, which would be handy, we'd have to go outside the urban growth boundary, and we're not allowed to do that by our charter.
Well, the other thing is another topic that came up on our additional things to discuss tonight, so maybe I can cover it here, is this concept of alternate provision of transit service other than TriMet, so the opt-out option. And the city isn't just jumping on that bandwagon, but it's been in the press a fair amount about why cities should or shouldn't opt out of TriMet. And there was a gentleman that I meant to bring that. I don't know
John
what I
Charles.
did.
John Charles of the Cascadian Policy Institute.
That's right. He brought.
I think he is the Cascadian Policy Institute.
Yeah.
one other-
Why cities and counties should consider leaving TriMet. He brought this brochure. I only grabbed one, but it's John Charles from the Cascade Policy Institute. And it's at www.cascadepolicy.org. I have yet to have a chance to read this, William. Sounds like maybe you already have. So, that's...
I don't agree with his conclusions, all of them, but I have to say I'm impressed with his presentation. I mean, that's relatively professional.
Would you say you do or you don't?
I'm not sure I agree with all of his conclusions, but I'm impressed with his presentation of the information. I just wish that he was getting that information from, more than just his own head.
Yeah. So anyway, there's that. I think the city commission asked us to bring some discussion back at a future work session. So that's out there as something that we're tasked or kind of going to have to pursue.
John, it would be nice then if, as staff firms up their process for that, we could be kept in the loop, and if there's a role for us to get our oar in the water on that, it'd be great for this organization to do that, this committee.
Also a question, is it still the law that once you opt out of TriMet, you're out for good?
Well, I think there's some question about the law itself. I still haven't answered those. I'm not sure the city can opt out, but maybe it sure can. I don't know, but there was that question. I heard it's not as easy to opt out as it used to be when, say, Wilsonville or
Canby.
Canby and Malone.
or Canby or Sandy made that decision. So.
I'd like to follow up on a comment, excuse me, about the comment. John, if you're going to have an opportunity to talk to TriMet to find out why Oregon City is not on one of the stakeholder lists, that's just absurd.
If we're not, seem like we can opt out easier.
Is it possible to have
That far off the radar.
TriMet come to our, give a presentation about service and options and what the future holds? And
Well, I think in the future it would. My sense is that there was a pretty good discussion at the city commission meeting. So I think it would be worthwhile to take a look at that,
Basically,
and then I'd like to see kind of which, where the discussion goes with the city commission on this opt-out option. And my sense is that's going to involve more work.
I think that's
that this committee would be pretty involved with, and maybe at that time
Best service plan.
have the
I know, but those buses,
TriMet there.
exactly that. will be
The other
affected.
thing is we've got this opportunity. They've got this service plan. They've also got a southeast corridor plan that's coming up, which includes Oregon City. It includes a lot of Clackamas County, actually, but that's another public involvement process where not only they just, the southeast corridor plan looks more at, the Portland-Milwaukee bus service plan is more about how to redistribute buses. The Southeast Corridor Plan is more about the idea of long-range transit planning for rail and high-capacity transit across the whole region, which includes not just Oregon City, but it's on the south, kind of like the Southwest Corridor Plan that's currently kind of under discussion with Tigard and Tualatin and that area. They did quite a plan there, so they're talking about doing a plan similar to that for the Southeast Corridor.
Mr. Chair.
So that would be another opportunity for them, TriMet, to
Get on
come
the
talk to us
floor
about
here
that.
and just blurt it out. Another question here. Do we push the button on here if we want to talk?
No, we actually,
We're a little more casual.
I haven't
than
figured that out yet.
Okay, well, I could request.
That isn't on.
I could request to speak, but that'd make him have to push another button. So, I just want to make. You mentioned something earlier tonight, Pete. Excuse me for shifting here, but Pete, you talked about the cooperation that we were getting from the county. Was that you that made a comment about?
Technical advisory team reviewing the South End concept plan throughout the process.
About the county's transportation.
Well, we had a stakeholder group that included county planning and transportation staff on the South End concept.
I'm just wondering if we get a little deeper into the weeds on this TriMet issue, I imagine we're going to be holding hands with county on that as well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the county does have a.
To mix metaphors.
Now, Steve Cutts is with TriMet, but Clackamas County does have a transit system of their own. It's more based on special needs, so almost a ride-share system. And there's been, some of the programs that have been utilized by TriMet and other agencies are, like, for instance, right now there's a service from Mary's Woods in Lake Oswego to Oregon City, and the church up on Lynn, Oregon City Evangelical. They're running 2 or 3 trips to Oregon City that anyone can jump on right now, and they did that through a grant. So there's kind of more and more of those kind of programs that are dabbling in how to move people around, and that may be the model that that's the model that TriMet is interested in, trying to find, because a lot of TriMet's problem is more about how they cover their employee costs, right? So if there's like that Mary's Woods model, they're using the vans that they have for the adult center there at Mary's Woods to get back and forth to Oregon City. And it's kind of and they were able to get a grant, able to use existing equipment, really kind of pay for their fuel and their driver costs that way at a pretty low cost per year. Now, is it sustainable? That's a whole another problem. And one of the concerns that I have is to start a program that lasts for maybe 2 years, and then if the funding and those people that are running those programs kind of get worn out, then what happens at 2 years after people are kind of dependent on those programs? Then you have yet a whole other community that's kind of upset with you. So we don't want to do that either. We really want to take a holistic approach, and I think the county could and maybe should, because it's not like we've got this glass window around Oregon City.
There's another possibility that I've thought of for decades, and I've never really seen it realized. And maybe that's just because they're all painted orange with big red lights on them.
School buses.
There's a whole school district that has hundreds and hundreds of vehicles that sit idle 90% of the time. I'm thinking, well, gee, why couldn't we use those for public transit? Or find some sort of a partnership there?
Good ideas.
They're cheap.
Who do we call to find out more about the transit between the Evangelical Church and Mary's Woods?
I have that brochure. It's on my desk. Maybe I can
Ask
grab it.
Tom.
I think you just call up Mary's Woods.
I think the Mary Woods bus stops the Pioneer Center. I've seen it there anyway.
Yeah. There's an actual brochure with the schedule that they're running.
I could probably look it up on the internet.
I want to say I don't remember if we have a link to that. I don't think we have a link to that.
Okay.
Well,
Can I ask?
From what I understand, the commission has instructed staff to look into the opt-out option, and I was wondering which staff has been tasked to do that, because it's going to be kind of a fast-track study, because you can only opt out every 5 years, I believe it is. The next time would be 2016.
The Art Commission.
Yeah, I've not heard that, but the city commission just generally designated staff, and they directed that to the city manager. But
Right, that's
I think
what I
a lot
meant.
of that falls to Public Works, just because we've been the one that have kind of been the default on that in the past.
Goes along with arts and all
The
that.
Arts Commission, yeah.
But I'm not excited
I
about
feel
any
sorry
of that,
for you,
to tell
John,
the
because
truth.
when I was a brand new second lieutenant, they had a special designation called the O&E officer. It was for green second lieutenants, and your situation kind of reminds me of that, because O&E stands for odds and ends.
He's got broad shoulders. Look at that. Look at that
Well,
guy.
I mean, I think the city manager recognizes that that's a pretty big task, and
Yeah.
so far he hasn't necessarily said, "John, you get to take this on." But
Isn't that more or less a legal
I think he'll be leaving now.
process through the?
thanks, Pete.
Wait a minute, Stanner. Wait a minute, Planner.
He's going to leave.
It seems to me like that'd be.
Maybe we ought to let
something
planning do it, huh?
the city attorney would look at that.
Well, I think the legality of it, you're definitely right. That's
Because-
one piece of it. Then there's the other piece, assuming it's legal, that how do you partner? Who do you partner with? What are the options?
How do you fund it?
How do
That
you
was
fund
my
it?
question too. Is it
How much revenue is potential is there from, so
Dump
there's
it on
just,
Wyatt. He's got staff.
yeah, that's right. It's probably a multi-pronged approach.
I don't know. I would rather see us work, figure out a way to work with TriMet and, maybe be part of this conversation of how do we take those buses and redistribute them into the Oregon City and enhance the system versus trying to create our own transportation system.
The advantages of a regional system are one smooth working system that covers the whole region. If all you want to do is get around inside of Oregon City, that'd be one thing, but I don't think we can do that. I don't think there's enough activities here in Oregon City that will satisfy all of the people that need public transit. We need to get out of this area, which means a regional solution.
I think looking into this could possibly provide leverage for Oregon City if you find that the cost of the bus service here is much less than the payroll tax that's coming out of this community to support it. And then there's a quiet effort to at least evaluate opt-out that gives you leverage to get more of the bus connections that we think would be desirable. So it doesn't hurt to have them both on the table at the same time.
That's a good strategy.
That's great. I think that's a great idea.
Good strategy.
All right. So
Is that all of TriMet?
Kathy wanted to say something.
Well, I was thinking you were referring to the stakeholder list, is that correct?
I was.
And you were wondering why a specific Oregon City committee wasn't referenced on there, or just the city of Oregon City?
Either or both.
Well, I think that they were, when you see the first paragraph, it talks about residents, transit riders, and governments, etc. So it's implied that all communities are included, and in addition to that, these specific committees, agencies.
I saw that it said governments, which of course would include us.
Yeah.
But why bother calling out these other entities? I mean, they've got all these neighborhood associations in Clackamas County, but they're not mentioning the Oregon City neighborhood associations.
Yeah, that's where they fell short.
I think the closest one is with Jennings Lodge, maybe?
Yeah.
That's a long ways from Oregon City.
They'll take the transit.
This is in Oregon City School District.
That's not on here, where is it?
Jennings Lodge is.
Is it?
Yeah. There's that little narrow strip that
Oh, I didn't know that.
runs through there. I think they could have hingeable buses leave Oregon City and go down the freeway over to Beaverton and back. Like Seattle has, goes down the freeway. Express buses.
Yeah.
So, quick question for John. The fact that TriMet was here and made a presentation and had a discussion with the commission, does that mean that they've then done what they need to do to touch base with key stakeholders, in other words, Oregon City, or
They
do we
did
have
say-
other
they
do we
did
have
say that they're
other
going to talk to
volunteer
more.
other options for volunteers to participate, somehow formally representing the city rather than just showing up as Joe Citizen?
Well, they haven't even started the public outreach, or they're just now starting public outreach on this Portland, Milwaukee light rail / bus plan. They haven't yet started the Southeast Corridor plan. Both of those are going to, probably to a lesser extent, based on the fact that we're not on the list for the enhanced busing because of the light rail, but they were looking for city involvement and input from the city on how we wanted to participate in that. So I think
should we
there's plenty of opportunity left.
Should
for
we
that.
suggest ways or wait for you to come back in February with some options to
Right,
participate?
what I said was, we need to figure out how this group wants to
Thanks,
be
Pete.
involved. We don't have to do that tonight, but if you want to do that tonight, we can. If this group wants to set up a subcommittee that would like to be pretty involved in that process, then we could do that.
Yeah, this Steve Kautz, the manager of service development planning and blah, 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 indicated that he was wanting to reach out and make presentations to the neighborhood associations in Oregon City. Tom O'Brien gave him a piece of his mind, too. And I invited him to come and talk to the OCBA and perhaps the chamber as well. So they are looking for input. I don't know if they're looking on having a stakeholder as a member of a decision-making body or not, but
How much weight, a neighborhood group has versus, an official city committee, transportation advisory committee. I don't have a sense of that, but those are good questions. I'd be happy to ask.
At least at a minimum, we could see if they would make a presentation to us so we could then better understand it and figure out if we want to have further involvement as a committee.
Right.
I agree.
So does that sound like something we want to do at our next meeting?
Well, shouldn't we have an answer to the question as to whether or not the city commission wants to pursue this opt-out option?
I think that's a different question. I mean, we could be chasing down the opt-out option for a long time,
if we could
but
keep-
but choosing to not be involved in the current study and the current work plan that TriMet has, I
Oh,
think,
I see.
is,
Okay.
is
All
pretty
right.
important.
Makes sense.
The opt-out plan is maybe it's going to move forward, relatively quickly, and I just don't know. But right now, there's this kind of, or in the next couple of months, there's this need for some city involvement on this to gather more public.
I'd try a motion
Feedback.
that the TAC requests that staff find out if TriMet would make a presentation to outline this to our commission. And from that, we can see if there's further steps.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I just want to say that I think it's appropriate for this committee to, be involved in.
We have to advise. So, okay, let's move on. John's getting his show ready here, and it's about the Dutch Brothers.
Well, I mean, this information is included in your packet. So all we're really pulling up here is packet-related information. There's 5 options that came. Oh, well, first of all, so city hired Kittleson and Associates in 2009 to start a study of the Dutch Brothers and traffic problems associated with access to Dutch Brothers. And that study didn't really get finished. I think some of that had to do with the fact that Main Street was in the plans for reconstruction. The intersection here was kind of in the hot and heavy of design work for that. I'm not exactly sure, but it just didn't get finalized. And although I do think there were some meetings that happened with the property owner at that time, and there was some minor changes to the driveway at that time as well. So basically the report didn't get finished. So we've since asked Kittleson Associates, who is another traffic engineer, in the area, who's done a lot of work in Oregon City, to kind of complete the report. We asked them for PM and AM and PM traffic counts at the intersection and the driveways to Dutch Brothers. So they completed that work. They looked a lot at kind of how traffic was moving through the intersection and in and out of the driveways at Dutch Brothers and any other kind of operational pieces, and they've provided these 5 options, and they're really kind of recommending one of those options. So I'm just trying to give you an update. We've yet to meet with the property owners on this of Dutch Brothers, and really haven't. It's just kind of been sitting on my desk waiting to kind of proceed. But so this is option 1, which is essentially to provide a raised median that would prohibit a left turn for eastbound 10th Street eastbound traffic. And so the only way to get into that would be if you're essentially westbound coming down Singer Hill. You could turn in, you could make a right turn in. If you stayed on 10th, you'd have to go to the top of Singer Hill and turn around and come back down and go in that way. Or you could find your way in on the Main Street entrance. So there's some signage details there. I'm not sure how much of that you need to know or need to discuss. Option 2, one of the things that they noticed was a lot of the traffic that's making that's going, I guess it would be westbound on 10th Street. A lot of that traffic, there's not many in terms of the traffic counts that are making the left turn onto Main Street or making the left turn onto 99E. Most of the traffic is making the right turn or going, in this case at 10th, they're going through the intersection. So there was this idea of just rather than putting a dedicated turn pocket, making a center turn lane. They also suggested restriping 10th Street between Main and 99E with a little different striping configuration that would make those turn pockets bigger, but would also restrict traffic off of 99E onto 10th to one lane and one narrower lane. And so that we'd have to work with ODOT on that one. I'm not sure what their perspective on that would be, but this was another recommendation. Let's see. This alternate really doesn't change much in the public right-of-way, but would require the property owner to basically move the building and reconfigure his parking lot. We've looked at some options like this in 2009. Again, we haven't talked to the property owner, but my sense at that time was this was a pretty large investment and not something that he was willing to pursue.
You talked to the property owner in 2009?
The city did. I didn't
Okay.
personally, but the city did. Nancy at the time, I think, was working with them.
So the main access would be off Main.
Yeah, it would also close the driveway access off of 10th Street altogether, and so they'd only have one access off of Main. And there is some question. To me, there's still some question about closing all access off of 10th and how that has a potential to still have an impact at the intersection of 10th and Main, as we may see traffic backing up on into the intersection there as well. But maybe not with all the storage and the flow through traffic that this plan allows for.
Getting the left turn out of Dutch Brothers on this one would be a pain in the butt.
And go right.
Yeah, well, the
Go
Dutch
down
Brothers
12.
driveway is messed up a little bit anyway because you drive out on the left and you drive in on the right as it currently is configured. So
With this configuration, everybody's got to go out though, that way.
in and out that way.
Yeah, in and out that way, yeah.
There's similar concepts, still driving the access off of, or still closing the access off of 10th. Again, reconfiguring. This doesn't move the building. This just provides for kind of a horseshoe kind of shaped with a roundabout on it. I'm not sure it works real well.
Still got to get your coffee off the driver's side, don't you?
Yep. Unless you got a passenger.
Or a British-made car.
Yeah.
This is option 5, and the option that they recommended. It basically just restripes and reconfigures the roadway to match what's happening now, only it does so with a dedicated turn pocket. And also requires some reconfiguration of the striping and parking layout inside the property. There's another little problem that I have, and that's just if you notice as a driver, you've probably driven around somebody on your way up the hill. And if you notice that, there's you really kind of have to, as you're coming through Main Street and headed up Singer Hill, you really kind of have to, wow out to your right, and then there's basically if you kept going forward, there's the railroad gate.
Yeah.
And the pedestal that supports the railroad gate. So, striping that, signing that, putting armament there, whatever we have to do, there's some capital improvements that have to happen on that side of the roadway.
TriMet goes up that hill too.
What's that?
TriMet goes up Singer, doesn't it?
Yeah, 99X does.
So then you make it really tough for a TriMet driver they're having a hard enough time trying to make that turn in the first place. And if you take a truck and a semi coming up that hill to service the stores, so they'd have a trouble time to get around it because they're Singer Hill. No.
Yeah, I guess my thought on that is there's, that assumes that there's somebody in that turn pocket. And if it's not something that the driver felt they could make, then they would have to stop just like they stopped today. But you're right. The way it's striped, it makes kind of you got to turn back and then turn to get up the hill.
TriMet go up Singer Hill?
99X does. 99X does.
Oh, okay. That's a long bus, huh?
Yeah, that's an express bus from the community college to downtown.
I can't remember. I was thinking TriMet used Washington Street, but you may be right. I've never. I don't remember.
My impression on all these plans, though, is they will, with the exceptions of the ones that close that access, you would still have the problem of the backup on Singer Hill, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Still provide allow for that left turn in. All except those that close that driveway.
Yeah.
You'd be able to add more car with a double lane in. You'd be able to add more cars in queue, and then they'd have to take turns going into the drive-through.
Yeah. And there is more storage because of the way it's striped, but not a lot.
I'm concerned about the uphill peds and bikes going up because they only go on that inside curve there. Is there going to be room enough for them to get around that bend? Right now, walking up there is tricky. Once you get past the
tall
the
curve.
railroad tracks, there's a like a 3-foot step that you got to jump up.
This wouldn't change any of that.
It looks like it's changing a little bit.
No, this wouldn't change anything on that side.
This
of the
area
railroad.
right along here?
Right, that wouldn't change.
Let's just
What's
try-
what's problematic about option 4?
Well, what's problematic about it is just closing an entrance on 10th and asking that property owner to redevelop that parking scheme so that that works. But it does alleviate the the problem coming down the hill and that being backed up. I mean, I do. My preference is anything that prohibits turns on 10th. But I see the impact that would have on that particular property. So I want to be pretty cautious.
If you also look at that on the entrance off of Main Street, the way it's got laid out, you naturally want to go to the right when you come off of the street, and you've got a car on the right that's headed right at you trying to get on, so you've got crisscross traffic right there on the sidewalk, and the guy wanting to go out of that and get onto Main Street's going to be almost across the sidewalk waiting to go.
And can you picture the gridlock? Can you picture the gridlock of somebody going northbound on Main Street trying to turn in, and somebody coming out, and they're blocking up right there, and they're only 2 car lengths away from the intersection.
Or less.
I mean,
or
any
less.
of these alignments that show that Main Street only entrance, quite likely to back traffic up into that intersection.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
They
It
are.
might go up to Singer Hill a little bit too, so.
Oh, it blocks everything.
If you look at option 1, it still allows the most used entrance, that's on 10th, on the right turn coming into it. And what you've done is you've put that median in there, so you don't have any left turns there. And looking a little bit beyond, and you'd have to check this out to see if it's really relevant, but usually if you want a quiet zone in an urban area for trains, you have gates. What they want to do is make sure that a car can't swerve around the gate. The way you do that is by having a median. So all I'm just saying is the median right there might serve 2 purposes. It might serve as the first key piece of making sure you can qualify for a quiet zone at that intersection, plus eliminating those left turn lanes.
If you check the traffic intersection counts, you're cutting out half of his business too.
He can still the people who are coming down can get in either way. I mean, they can come in from the other direction.
Right.
Granted, it's not ideal, but you're not asking him to change anything in his parking lot.
Right. But 33 cars versus 37 are making the left turn off of 10th across the downhill traffic going in.
Right. So, putting our hat on, what is our role? Are we looking at best traffic flow on the roads, or are we factoring in the business factor, or is that somebody else down the line that does that? I mean, if we're looking at best traffic flow, then maybe option 1 is. I'm just proposing that, because you get rid of that left turn lane, you're increasing the capacity for right turns incoming west on 10th, and yes, you're going to have other traffic either go elsewhere or they're going to struggle and come in off of Main Street there.
John,
Which-
I like the idea of the median, but you could put that median on option 5 also.
Yes, you could.
I would be
In the exact
concerned
same
about
place.
the loss of business, though, that they would experience from that. And speaking of our roles, it's not only traffic, but we also consider safety issues in regard to school zones. So we're involved with schools. So we also would assume some responsibility considering impact of our decisions on businesses.
Not following the.
Well, with that median there, they would lose some of their business because they wouldn't be able to enter their business from 10th Street, except coming down.
They can always come in that way.
Enter from Main Street.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah, so what they would do is if.
How do they turn around in that
Well,
parking lot from that?
Well, it's difficult, so, but
Oh.
all I'm saying, that's what some of them are doing right now.
Oh,
So
okay.
someone traveling east on 10th, instead of coming up and turning in where they currently turn in, they turn on Main and
We
then
are
make a
married to
right
our
turn
cars, aren't we?
into that.
Okay,
And I just did that today to see if you could actually turn your vehicle around without backing it once. And I had to back it because there was some cars parked there. But at any rate, you can drive in and out from that other act. So you have an entrance there. And you're making a left turn anyway, but this time you're making it at an intersection where it's designed to handle it.
well, I guess my point was that we do have to consider businesses when we're considering traffic issues also.
This question is, how much weight do you give them? Because of the hat we wear as a transportation committee.
Well, he needs to buy that place that's on the end of Mulholland Avenue, the old coffee shop. And
Oh, yeah,
And that
the
eliminate-
Big Dog
Yeah.
place, yeah.
So, John, as an engineer, I like John's comment about the other John's comment about the median being close to the train crossing. Couldn't you put that median on option 5? I think of all of them, option 5 makes the most sense to me.
Well, I'm not following the option. The beauty of option 5 is it allows the left-hand turn.
Well,
Yeah,
take the
it's-
left-hand turn out.
Just east
You're
of that left-hand
Yes,
turn.
I'm saying don't put the median all the way to block the turn, but put the median at
All right, and
this little diamond that isn't doing anything there. Instead of just striping that, put a raised median there.
not to prevent anything, just to help
Yeah.
with the clear zone that John was talking
Just to
about.
talk about the clear zone, yeah, not to prevent anything. Well, for the
Well,
reason that he said that we
Well,
could,
I guess we could look at median sizes, those kind of things, but it's back to, I do see some maneuverability issues where if that's all striping, we can still see a bus or a large truck kind of maneuver through that.
The only
And
reason
the
is
median
what
that's
John
shown
said.
in option 1, while
It's
it's nice
proximity to the
and wide,
crossing.
the reality of that is it could be, they're actually showing that, so maintain the one lane of traffic through here, which,
I'd leave it 2 lanes.
so it could be a narrower median, more of a center street median.
Yeah, I mean, with that, I don't know how a person would get, if they're coming from 99, I guess they would have to go on Main Street and enter there and make the turns in the parking lot to get back.
Yeah.
I guess if you really want your coffee, you would do that. Otherwise, you would just go to Starbucks down on.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no, none of these options are great. That's probably why we haven't had a solution. I do.
Have we had any accidents there, or is this just an obstruction issue?
Well, there's accidents there. Yeah.
Bicycles was hit there last year before.
Oh, that was at Geezer, wasn't it? Hit the
No,
kid.
no. This was actually when we opened in 2012, just before someone came down Singer Hill. Someone turned right into Coffee Rush and took them out.
We've had trouble with one of the reasons why we put the flashers on the railroad grade there was
Right.
because people were getting backed up there, whether it be because of Dutch Brothers or be because it was backed up at 10th Lane or backed up at 99E and 10th.
Get them out of June
And,
Pool, even there.
so people were actually pulling out onto the railroad grade, so that was problematic as well. I like this solution, but only if there's improvements that are done along the vacant lot that would fix the sidewalk and fix the curb. The road kind of drops off pretty severely as you get outside the fog line there. I'd like to see that all kind of brought up to grade so that we've got kind of consistency there. But I do think this works. You know, some have said, well, what if, sometimes I've seen more than 3 cars waiting to make that left-hand turn.
Yeah.
Based on the counts, you know, I mean, unless their coffee gets any better, you know, I don't know. It just seems like that's probably not that likely to happen.
Maybe you could get the adjacent business owner to cough up the money for the improvements on that vacant lot.
That's exactly right, Bob. I mean, I think that's,
He
there's,
doesn't own it, doesn't bother him.
there's some,
Dutch Brothers is a big company.
He's not even.
You're not even fighting.
I mean,
Blaine doesn't own it, Bob. He's just renting.
So
Okay.
is the option of having the owner, I don't know how easy it is to do, but to move that north, maybe about 10 feet, and then allow access on the other side as well, so you'd have double?
move that north. What do you mean by move that north?
Move the coffee hut and move it north. Maybe, you know,
Not
10,
on option 5.
not a, well, like here move it this direction 10 feet and allow access, so one of the lanes could go down this side and the other lane could go down the other side.
So if the building was in the center and you served off of both sides?
Right.
Like a toll booth?
Right, and then you're moving people through quicker, and
Then you could use the 10th Street as an exit also.
exactly.
I don't know how you can go with any options that require shifting of the building.
Oh, yeah. That's a,
I don't see
that's
how
onerous.
the owner, I mean, has
It's
that
not an
incentive.
unreasonable requirement unless they want to do it themselves.
Yeah.
They've got,
And why
more,
should they?
more business for them. That could be a justification, but you'd have to.
we've got, to me, the preferred options are option 1, which provides a median that prohibits the left turn altogether. Or we
5.
require option 5, which might require some frontage improvements. They're needed frontage improvements anyway. The sidewalks along there are trashed, and need to be replaced. So maybe there's a shared interest on behalf of the city and the coffee shop owner, and that's where I'd like to proceed. I'm not asking for any kind of recommendation or motion from you guys tonight. I'm just thinking I wanted to talk through this a little bit, show it to you, and get your thoughts, and then probably the next step is to sit down with the property owner and share with them the report and let them know kind of what I'm thinking. I mean, I'm the one who can make the call on this particular answer. But
I
don't
see
wanna
a
make
lot
an
of people
informed one.
taking chances when they're coming up the hill to make a left turn in there. They'll cut in front of people. You know, there's 2 lanes of traffic there, and if they see one lane, just a little bit of break, that gives them their excuse to shoot right between there. And if it's let's say it's an icy morning or a wet morning, people don't have time to stop since you hit the tracks, and coming across that, you're being careful anyway. But
Yeah, but that's true on any center turn pocket. People turn in front of one another. The sight distance here is adequate.
you ever feel a
so
car
people-
hit you in the leg, a bumper?
Say that again?
You ever have a car hit you in the leg?
No, not me.
I had it right out here. I was riding a motorcycle and somebody T-boned me.
I got on a bike, flipped me right over the roof. That's good.
It happens. All right.
I had one observation,
Yeah.
that's on your traffic count map, which was figure 2. I'm not familiar enough with these, but it looks like the number of vehicles going in and that are recorded is not the same number of vehicles going out that are recorded. Now,
They're in agreement, though.
So, I don't,
It looks quite reasonable to me.
I don't know what that means, maybe.
37 goes in and
No, there's about 5 to 7 variants if you add the numbers together.
Maybe that's because
They were done on different days.
the different days. I don't know about that. It shouldn't be. It should be. It could be that. I don't know.
Some of
There's
them are
on-site
cute.
parking there. Maybe there's a difference. I don't know. I haven't
Maybe
looked
they're
at that.
queued up waiting to get out. I
Well,
don't know.
it's likely that one guy.
Shanghai.
It's likely that one guy did the traffic counts and he did them on different days, at different locations.
I'll
Said they were collecting
look
in
to see if
October, but
there's-
that's all.
Well, John, from my point of view, I think our responsibility is to public safety first. I think that coincides with traffic flow.
more conservative from the city's perspective as opposed to the business perspective.
Yeah, I think we owe it to the public to make an attempt to ensure their safety regarding this. And I just think that traffic piled up there because of a cup of coffee doesn't justify what's happening down there. You know, there's people take chances getting around those cars, and there's pedestrians to be taken into consideration as well. So, I fall on the side of public safety first and traffic flow second. I sympathize with the business owner, but it's a terrible design for public access. It really is. I mean, yeah, if you had it to do all over again and came to you and said, "What'll I do here?" This problem wouldn't exist.
It's a major,
Pardon me?
it's a major road.
Sure. Sure.
Both of them.
Well, I'm surprised that Dutch Brothers, as being as big as they are, would develop a piece of property like this the way that they have and not take into consideration what we've just talked here tonight about. That surprises me. They should have more sensitivity to that.
Let's back this up a little bit. There was another company before Dutch Brothers there, and they bought that building.
Mhm.
So it wasn't Dutch Brothers that built the building.
Well, they could have moved it.
But they remodeled the building, but they,
And they should have moved it before they invited the public.
Heard a lot of good input. It's not, and this is not one of those easy ones to fix, but the next step will be to take it to the property owner. I want to see if there's an option here that would include some public improvements on their part.
I think they've come up with some pretty good ideas.
That's all I got.
okay? What's next? Communications, new business, discussion for new business for next time?
Did we have all the things that we wanted to add to the agenda touched on?
Got mine done, yeah.
Yours?
I haven't had mine yet.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I had two things. One was the Olson Drugs sidewalk area there. They're redeveloping, and they've got the security fence up there to protect the contractor stuff, except the contractor, as I understand it, has an agreement with the city whereby he doesn't have to move the fence back as long as he's working at irregular times through there. Unfortunately, I think the city's being taken for a ride with that agreement. The fence has never moved, and they haven't worked since last time they worked. It's about Christmas, and they had two guys on the job for about 4 hours. And prior to that, it was early November. The fence is not being moved back when they are done.
Is this on 7th?
That's on 7th and Monroe.
I know but which side of the fence? All sides of the fence?
The 7th Street side is reasonably good, but the Monroe side is not being kept up. And as incidentally, the street trees there need their suckers cut back too. They're starting to sucker and grow and become a bush instead of a tree.
Because of the construction fencing there's pedestrian impediments. That's
Correct.
okay. I don't know that there's any special agreement there, but I haven't heard of that. It may just be that we're not enforcing it.
Well, that's the line of thought that I had too.
And your next one?
Oh, the next one, and I'm going to leave some pictures here just because I happened to find them on Google Earth, but it's similar to the Dutch Brothers thing in the sense that up on Molalla between Warner Milne and basically the Beaver Creek, there's a fair amount of people making left-hand turns out of the area around Walgreens and Kentucky Fried Chicken, and they're crossing 2 lanes of oncoming traffic and a left turn lane to get into the lanes they want to use to come down the hill. And sometimes they're not waiting for the traffic to clear. And it just so happens that Google Earth has a picture of a guy doing exactly that. So I printed them out for you, and I'll leave them so you can have a discussion about it.
But it's basically driveways that are
Between Walgreens and Kentucky Fried Chicken, and at the Kentucky Fried Chicken by the traffic signal, and they're showing pretty well in those pictures there. And it would affect the Burger King on the other side and Hillcrest Drive, I think.
Yep.
Wendy's.
Wendy's, I'm sorry.
You know how I get into Wendy's?
Back
I-
door?
No, I go
Over the
down
door?
and I turn before the bank,
Yeah,
between the Kentucky Fried Chicken and the bank, go down where Safeway comes in.
Right.
And take the light, go back and come across.
Right.
I won't,
well, that's supposed to be a right turn right out. It's not supposed to be a left turn.
I know, they don't.
Isn't it great to be part of the?
They need to do is push them out on the other street.
There's a few things. that-
And Walgreens,
Tell me
the
what I'm saying.
Walgreens connection is lousy anyway.
Yeah. Okay, I guess I have a citizen up here.
Paul Edgar. I'm sorry, I was up with the Chief of Police Council that I'm a member of. As a future agenda item for your Transportation Committee, the Chief of Police was going through and reviewing all of the statistics for this past year, and accidents on our streets compared to other cities are significantly higher. And we had quite a discussion trying to determine why Oregon City is having this significant increase in comparison to Milwaukee or Bend or Kaiser or all of these other cities, and we tried to get them into perspective about size, the types of accidents, and where they're happening, what type of accidents there were. And obviously, there are a lot of them are happening because now we have these smartphones, people too close, not paying attention to all sorts of other stuff. A lot of rear-enders, but a lot of it came back to the possibility of our infrastructure. And some of our streets, our hills, a lot of the things, and the chief of police just turned around and says, "I hope somebody helps us figure it out. What's unique about Oregon City?" And boy, if you see the delta difference between our city and these other comparable cities, we got an opportunity to figure something out. And maybe this is an opportunity of this committee to kind of step in and try to analyze the types of accidents that are occurring. Is there anything that's happening that where we could be smarter, or we should be doing something correctively? But it's that was one issue. It was just straight transportation, and in and around Oregon City, and the chief's got it all. You should get it, and maybe it would be something that a lot of heads looking at it could maybe make a difference, because the number of injury accidents are sky high.
So would it be possible, John, for you to contact the chief of police and maybe have him give us a presentation?
Yeah, it would be really nice to
great.
hear a little bit of the detail of that.
Yeah.
I'm
Like
not sure what
like
he's
the
talking
city of
about.
Milwaukee, you don't speed in that town. They got,
Yeah,
They
we
got-
Paul, what kind of accidents were prevalent?
rear-enders.
Rear
You know, we talk about speeding. You talk. You know, it covers the whole spectrum. But you kind of get the feeling like he said there was a lot of accidents on Highway 99. He said Highway 99 seemed like it was, and then there was discussion about these new flickering left turn yellow lanes. Okay, where people can't figure them out. You know, we have a lot of people driving that shouldn't have driver's license. But we got to figure it was just interesting because here we had our group, and we were sitting there, and he's throwing it up at us, and he says, "Boy, I would sure hope that somebody could come in and help us figure out what this is, and why are we double bent?"
Well, some in accidents happen because of the new crosswalk laws, that people stop real quick because I see a car.
And he's got a new traffic guy who's just strictly trying to write tickets and trying to be smarter, trying to wise people up. We talked about the photo camera at Milwaukee and how in Oregon City we have a much higher degree of respect and of our police force. In Milwaukee, they hate their cops, and their cops hate themselves, and they're all looking to hire on to Oregon City.
In Milwaukee, for 2 times a week, that council chamber is packed full of people trying to get their tickets reduced.
And somehow we've got a better reputation around a lot of these areas for our police force of being a quality police force than all of these other municipalities. So it's
well, there's one other big factor, and that's that we've got a community college in the county seat, and a lot of people coming to this town to do business here just because of that. They're unfamiliar with the town.
You ever,
Mr. Chair?
just what you say, if you go up on the hill here in Oregon City, when the school is out, the college is out, and the county is like yesterday.
Yeah.
It's easy moving. But if those 3 things are down, you notice the difference in traffic, especially when the college has 4,000 cars that come out of there.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, may I suggest that rather than us continue this discussion because it's late already, we just invite the chief to come and talk to us at the next meeting?
I think it would be great.
Okay.
And I think it would be a great opportunity to help him.
Sure.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any more? Looks like we're down to the last wire, and let me hit the hammer.
The last thing that I wanted to put on the agenda for next month,
Yes.
that I mentioned, is on Molalla, at the intersection of Molalla and Gaffney Lane, where Burgerville is, and Joanne's Fabrics across from Fred Meyer's. It concerns me that's because that's my neighborhood. I'm the land use chair up there. That there's traffic. I don't know what direction is that? That's northbound on Molalla. That cuts across the left turn lane, cuts into the left turn lane to cross over to go into Joanne's driveway to go around and into Burgerville. And it seems to me it'd be a real simple thing to put some sort of a light barrier there to say that you can't turn into that driveway of Joanne's. Go down to the next Joanne's driveway and make that an exit only. So maybe, can we look at that?
Sure. I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
We also previously had planned to discuss our support of the city commission goals. They will have their goal-setting meeting soon.
Saturday, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So we should be able to discuss those. If Kathy, you could send us a copy of their revised goals or whatever they want for us to prepare for that agenda item, would that work?
Okay, if they change them.
Right, or revise any of them.
Okay. Anything else? Let's adjourn this place. Go home.
Let's go home.